The silence in a crowded room can be deafening when you feel like the signals of attraction have moved past you. Most men over 50 aren't losing their edge, they are simply looking for the wrong whetstone. You remember the high-energy, obvious cues of your 20s, the hair flipping, the loud laughter, the direct eye contact that felt like a challenge. But the world changes as we season. A woman in her 50s or 60s has refined her approach. She no longer needs to shout to be heard, and she certainly doesn't need to chase to be noticed. She uses a language of subtlety, a series of quiet probes designed to see if you are the man you appear to be. If you miss these, you aren't just missing a date, you are missing a connection that has the depth you've spent half a century cultivating. It is a common struggle, feeling as though you are speaking a dead language while everyone else has moved on to a new dialect. But this dialect is actually more ancient and more rewarding. It is the language of presence. You see, after 5 decades of life, a woman is rarely looking for a conquest. She is looking for a harbor. She is looking for a man who is observant enough to see her, grounded enough to hold her interest, and confident enough not to need her constant validation. When she flirts, she isn't performing, she is inviting. She is opening a small door to see if you have the courage and the awareness to walk through it. If you treat these moments like simple, polite conversation, you effectively close that door in her face without even knowing you did it. Let us look at how these invitations manifest in the real world, starting with the most common and often most misunderstood test of all. Consider the case of Julian. At 55, Julian is a successful architect who carries himself with a certain quiet dignity. While attending a charity gala, he found himself in conversation with an elegant woman named Elena. 10 minutes into a pleasant chat about the evening's cause, she looked at him over the rim of her glass and asked, "How old are you exactly?" Julian, feeling a sudden surge of self-consciousness about the silver at his temples, laughed nervously and made a joke about being prehistoric. He watched as Elena's smile stayed polite, but her eyes moved elsewhere. The warmth vanished. What Julian missed was that Elena wasn't looking for a birth certificate. She was checking his internal temperature. She was asking, "Are you comfortable in the skin you are in?" At this stage of life, your age is your resume of experience. When a woman asks this with a slight tilt of her head, she is gauging whether you carry your years as a burden or a badge of honor. A man who flinches at his age reveals a lack of self-acceptance. A more grounded response, perhaps saying that you are exactly the age required to appreciate a woman like her, would have signaled that you are unshakable. It is not about the number. It is about the unwavering nature of your response. Then there is the question of history, which often trips up even the most seasoned men. Take Arthur, a 60-year-old widower who had recently re-entered the social scene. He met Sarah at a local book reading. They shared a love for historical biographies, and the conversation was flowing beautifully. Then, Sarah asked a question that felt like a sharp turn. "Why is a man like you still unattached?" Arthur immediately felt the need to explain. He launched into a 5-minute monologue about his late wife, his brief attempt at dating 2 years ago, and his general skepticism of modern apps. He thought he was being honest. In reality, he was being heavy. Sarah wasn't looking for a romantic audit. She was dropping a massive hint. By saying "a man like you," she was already complimenting him. She was signaling that she saw value in him and was curious if there was a vacant space she might eventually fill. When you respond with a heavy baggage dump, you signal that you are still living in the past. A sophisticated response acknowledges the past without being anchored by it. You might say that you have been focused on building a life you love, but you are now realizing that life is better when shared with someone who has a similar spark. This keeps the focus on the present moment and the potential between the two of you, rather than the ghosts of relationships gone by. We must also recognize the hypothetical probe, which is a favorite for women who want to test your spirit without risking rejection. Samuel, a retired educator of 63, was enjoying coffee with a woman he had met through a mutual friend. Out of nowhere, she asked, "If you could disappear to a small villa in Italy tomorrow, would you go alone, or would you be afraid of the silence?" Samuel took it literally. He began discussing the logistics of travel insurance and who would water his plants. The woman, let's call her Diane, sighed and changed the topic. Samuel failed to see that this was a classic subtle signal. She was testing his sense of adventure and his emotional self-sufficiency. She was indirectly asking if he was the kind of man who could provide an interesting life, or if he was someone who had become stagnant in his routines. More importantly, she was subtly placing herself in a shared future scenario. When a woman asks about travel, or a dream, or a hypothetical change of scenery, she is inviting you to co-create a fantasy. She wants to see if you have the imagination to include her in the frame. Responding with logic is the quickest way to kill a romantic spark. Responding with playfulness, perhaps by asking if she's suggesting she's a good travel companion, is how you keep the fire burning. Physicality also changes its shape as we age. In your younger years, physical interest was often a game of bold moves. Now it is a game of inches and micro movements. Consider David, a 58-year-old who was sitting on a park bench with a long-time acquaintance. As they talked, she began to mirror his posture. When he leaned in, she leaned in. When she spoke, she would occasionally brush a piece of imaginary lint off his jacket. David, being a gentleman, simply thanked her and sat back. He didn't realize that the lint didn't exist. The touch was the message. For a woman over 50, physical touch is often a test of your receptivity. She is checking to see if you are aware of her presence as a woman, not just a conversational partner. If you don't acknowledge the touch with a subtle change in your own energy, perhaps a lingering look or a light touch on her forearm in return, she will assume the door is locked from the inside. She will retreat to protect her dignity, and you will go home wondering why she seemed to grow cold. This leads us to the final and perhaps most important signal: the competence probe. Robert, a 65-year-old woodworker, was visited in his shop by a woman who lived in his neighborhood. She brought a small broken picture frame and asked if it could be fixed. Robert, being an expert, told her it was a simple job and he'd have it done in 5 minutes. He fixed it, handed it back, and she left. Robert felt good about his efficiency, but he missed the point entirely. She didn't care about the frame. She cared about the man who knew how to fix things. She was seeking a reason to be in his space, to admire his skill, and to see how he handled a request for help. By finishing the task instantly and sending her on her way, he ended the interaction before it could breathe. A man who understands the subtle dance would have invited her to stay for a cup of tea while he worked, using the frame as a bridge to a longer connection. These scenarios all point to a singular truth. The signals of attraction after 50 are not about what is being said, but about the space between the words. To respond effectively, you must undergo a mindset shift. You must move away from the idea that you need to perform or impress. At this age, high-value women are not impressed by your car or your titles. They are impressed by your presence. Being present means listening with your whole body. It means noticing when her voice changes pitch. It means understanding that when she asks a question about your life, she is often really asking about hers. The most powerful response you can ever give is to show her that she is seen. Not just as a person, but as a woman who still has the power to captivate. When you recognize a signal, don't overthink it. Don't look for a script. Simply lean into the warmth. If she touches your arm, don't pull away. Stay in that contact for a second longer than is strictly necessary. If she asks a personal question, Answer with a smile that says, you know why she's asking. This is the difference between a man who is merely aging and a man who is becoming a master of his own environment. You have spent decades learning who you are. Now is the time to use that self-knowledge to invite someone else in. Pay attention to the quiet questions. Notice the sideways glances. Understand that every interaction is a series of small invitations. When you stop missing the moments, you start living the life you were meant to have. Respond with clarity, act with warmth, and remember that your presence is the greatest gift you can offer. If you carry that truth with you, you will find that the world is far more welcoming than you ever imagined. These doors are opening all around you. It is time you started walking through them. Drop the word presence in the comments if you are ready to start noticing the signals and taking your place as the man you were always meant to be.